Okay, so like how about we jump into something that, kind of makes a lot of people jump. Spiders. We're going to be talking about that fear, like deep down, that shudder feeling. When we think about, eight-legged crawlers.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and you are not alone. It's really common to have that kind of like, ooh, startle response to spiders. But for some people, that fear goes way beyond a little jump and a get it away from me, and that's when we're talking about arachnophobia.
Okay, so how do you know if it's just a regular dislike
Yeah.
of spiders? Or if it's something more, something serious, something that maybe needs attention? Like what's the difference between a, fleeting fear and a full-blown phobia?
That's a great question, and it is important to understand that difference because we all react in different ways to things that make us uncomfortable. But a phobia, it takes it to a whole other level. Think about it this way. Let's say you're invited to go camping, a little apprehension about encountering a spider. That's normal, totally normal. But if that worry turns into like avoiding it altogether, to the point where you miss out on the experience, that's a red flag.
Okay, so it's about the impact, really, that the fear has on your life.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be a little creeped out, but if it's stopping you from doing things that you enjoy, or if it's like constantly on your mind, that's where we're saying, okay, maybe this is something more.
Exactly, and that's such a good point. Because arachnophobia, it isn't just disliking spiders. Like, it is a diagnosable condition, and it can really interfere with someone's life, with their well-being. And it can look like a lot of different things, like constant worry about encountering a spider, avoiding social situations where you think there might be spiders, or even just being afraid to be alone in your home.
Wow, that definitely paints like a much more intense picture.
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly stressful.
Yeah, it absolutely can be. And that's why it's so important to talk about it, to understand what causes this fear, and most importantly, to learn about the effective treatments that are available.
For sure. So let's, I guess, dig into the why. What causes this sometimes debilitating fear? I mean, is it hardwired into our DNA, something we learn from our surroundings, or maybe a bit of both?
You've hit the nail on the head with a bit of both. It's actually a really fascinating debate. Researchers are still kind of going back and forth on it. And it seems like it's a really complex interplay of nature, nurture, and even our own individual experiences that create this fear.
Okay. All right, so you piqued my interest. Let's break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
What about the nature argument? What's the evolutionary perspective on why we might be, I don't know, predisposed to fear spiders?
Well, imagine our ancient ancestors living in a world full of unknowns, and some of those unknowns were, well, creepy crawlies with way too many legs, some of which could even be poisonous. So it makes sense that the ones who were a little more wary, a little quicker to jump back from a spider, might have had a better chance of surviving.
Right.
And that instinct to avoid danger could have been passed down through generations. And generations, eventually leading to the fear response that we see today.
That makes sense. Like a little healthy fear
Yeah.
of something that's potentially dangerous can definitely be a good thing when it comes to, staying alive.
Exactly. But it's not as simple as saying we're hardwired to fear all spiders because our ancestors did. That's where the nurture part comes in.
So how does our upbringing or the culture we grow up in influence something like a fear of spiders? This is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like every culture views spiders through that same lens of fear. Like I've even heard of cultures where spiders are considered like delicacies.
It's true. Think about that. In some cultures, the very thing that might make you, kind of squirm in your seat is actually considered a good source of protein. There are traditional dishes in places like Cambodia, Venezuela, where they actually use spiders, a lot of times tarantulas. They prepare them in all different kinds of ways. And it just shows how powerful that cultural conditioning can be in really shaping our perceptions and our reactions to things, even something as basic as fear.
It's kind of mind-blowing. It really makes you realize how much of our reality is just influenced by what we're exposed to growing up.
Exactly. Our upbringing, the stories we hear, the beliefs, the attitudes of our family and our community, all of these things play a role in shaping our fears or phobias. Like if you grow up in a household where spiders are constantly seen as dangerous or disgusting, it's way more likely that you're going to develop that fear, that aversion.
It's like that saying, we're not born afraid, we learn to be afraid. It makes you wonder how much of our fear is really our own and how much is just stuff we've internalized from our environment.
Absolutely. And that's why self-awareness is so important. And questioning those ingrained beliefs can be so powerful when it comes to managing fear. But going back to the causes of arachnophobia, we also can't discount personal experience.
Right, like a particularly scary encounter with a spider, especially early on in life, could definitely have a lasting impact.
For sure. Let's say you're a young child and you reach into a dark closet and you feel a large spider crawl across your hand.
Yeah.
That experience, on top of the natural startle response, can be really distressing. And depending on how that situation is handled by the adults around you, it can either make that fear worse or help to kind of calm it down a little.
So it's like this combination of instinct, learned behavior, and then those individual experiences that all sort of come together to create this web of fear we call arachnophobia.
Exactly. And you can imagine with all of these different factors at play, treating arachnophobia can be, well, multifaceted. There's no one right answer, no magic solution. But thankfully, there are effective treatments available.
That's good to hear. Sounds like arachnophobia is a lot more common than we might realize. So let's talk treatment. What can someone do if they are ready to, take control and break free from this fear? This is where I feel like there's a lot of hope, because there are ways to manage fear, even when it's like something as, as intense as this.
Right.
So let's talk about those tools, those strategies. What are some of the effective ways to actually treat arachnophobia?
You're right. There's a lot of hope. And it's amazing how much progress has been made in treating phobias in general.
Yeah.
One of the most, I would say, well-established and successful approaches is called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Okay, so I've heard of CBT, but how does it actually work?
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about a fear of spiders.
Okay, so CBT is all about recognizing and changing your negative thought patterns. So imagine you see a spider in the corner of the room. Your immediate thought might be, it's going to attack me.
Right.
CBT helps you take a second to hit the pause button on that thought and really examine it.
So it's like saying, hold on, brain.
Yeah.
Let's not jump to conclusions here.
Exactly.
Is this spider actually a threat?
Yes. You learn to challenge those automatic fear responses, and you replace them with more rational thoughts. It's about retraining your brain to react differently to spiders.
That makes sense, but rewiring your brain sounds like hard work.
It does take effort.
Yeah.
It does, but it's really effective.
Okay.
With the help of a therapist, you can work on identifying those negative thought patterns and then coming up with strategies in those moments to manage your anxiety. And you're slowly working up to facing those fears in a safe environment. And it can start with something small, like maybe looking at pictures of spiders. And eventually, if you're comfortable, maybe being in the same room as a real spider.
That's really interesting. It's like you're kind of rebuilding your relationship with spiders one thought at a time.
That's a really good way to put it. And along with CBT, there's also exposure therapy, which can be really powerful in overcoming phobias.
Okay, so tell me about exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Because isn't the idea of facing your fear head on a little, terrifying?
It makes sense to feel that way, but exposure therapy is a very gradual and controlled process. So it's not about just throwing you in the deep end right away. You might start with something as simple as looking at pictures of spiders, maybe watching videos, and then with your therapist, slowly working up to being in the same room as a real spider. And so the idea is to desensitize yourself to the object of your fear.
So it's like taking those baby steps.
Yeah.
And kind of building up that tolerance over time.
Yeah.
Almost like training for a marathon, but for your brain.
Yes. And the amazing thing is that as you face those fears in a safe and controlled environment, that fear response starts to go down. Your brain is understanding, okay, I'm not actually in danger.
Wow. And technology's come a long way in treating phobias too, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of virtual reality therapy being used. Is that something that's being done?
Oh, absolutely. Technology is playing such a bigger role now in mental health treatment.
Right.
And virtual reality therapy is a great example of that. It lets you have kind of a practice run.
Right.
So you can have that simulated encounter with a spider, but it's in a very safe and controlled setting.
So instead of an actual spider, you're interacting with a virtual one.
That's it. Exactly.
Does it feel real enough, though, to actually make a difference?
That's a great question. And yes, I mean, the technology has really advanced to the point where it can feel very, very real. And that's part of what makes it so effective. And your therapist can control, how intense the experience is. They can start with something very kind of low key and then gradually increase that realism as you get more comfortable.
It's amazing to think that something, as simple as putting on a VR headset could have that big of an impact on someone's life.
I know, it's remarkable. And the best part is these treatments can be really tailored to each individual person. So, what works for one person might not work for another. It's about finding the right approach with the help of a mental health professional.
Right. And that's so important, that reminder that, there's no shame in getting help. And everybody's kind of journey to overcoming fear is different. Let's say, though, you're in a situation and you do encounter a spider and that wave of fear starts to hit. What are some quick coping strategies that can help someone, in that moment?
Yeah, you're talking about those in-the-moment tools that can help you calm down, regain a sense of control. And one of the absolute simplest but most effective is deep breathing.
Okay, so talk to me about the power of deep breathing. Because I feel like we hear about that a lot. But how can someone do it effectively?
Yeah, well, when we get anxious, when we're afraid, our body goes into that fight or flight mode. Right. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing gets really shallow and fast. We are ready to run.
Yeah.
Deep breathing helps to kind of counteract that by slowing your heart rate down and sending that signal to your body that it's okay to relax.
So it's like hitting the brakes on that runaway train of anxiety.
Exactly. And yes, there are a few simple techniques. One that's really common is called box breathing.
Okay.
So you breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 4. Exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 4. And then hold again for a count of 4.
Okay.
And you just repeat that a few times, and it's amazing how quickly it can calm your nervous system down.
4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. I'm feeling relaxed just thinking about it.
It's a great one to have.
Yeah.
Whenever you're feeling anxious, not just for spiders, another technique that can be really helpful is mindfulness.
Okay. Mindfulness. Mindfulness seems to be kind of everywhere these days.
I know.
How can it help with something like a fear of spiders?
Well, mindfulness is all about being present in this moment without judgment. So when you encounter a spider, instead of letting your mind go to those what-if scenarios, mindfulness encourages you to just observe. Notice the spider's movements, its colors. If it has a web, look at the intricate patterns.
Yeah.
And by focusing on those neutral observations, you're shifting your attention away from the fear and just into what's happening right now.
It's like you almost become a spider scientist for a second.
Yes.
Just objectively observing this creature.
Yes.
Without attaching all that baggage to it.
You got it. That's exactly it. And along with deep breathing, mindfulness, don't forget about self-care.
Self-care, right? So important.
So important.
What are some key self-care practices that you would recommend?
Self-care is about building a really strong foundation for mental and emotional resilience. So prioritize sleep. Eat a balanced diet. Move your body, get some exercise. Find healthy ways to manage your stress. Maybe that's spending time in nature, doing some yoga, listening to music, whatever it is.
It's so easy to let those things slide.
I know.
When you're, busy with life.
Yeah.
But they make a difference.
Huge difference. And never, ever underestimate the power of connection. So talking to your friends, your family, a therapist, that can give you so much support and guidance. Remember, you don't have to do this alone.
Solid advice. Sometimes just knowing you're not the only one going through something can make all the difference in the world. Well, we've covered a lot.
We have.
In this deep dive. We've talked about, what causes arachnophobia. We learned about some effective treatments. Even equipped ourselves with some pretty handy coping strategies.
Yes.
As we kind of wrap things up here, what's one key takeaway? What do you want our listeners to remember from everything we discussed today?
If you remember nothing else, arachnophobia is a very common fear. And it is treatable.
Mm-hmm.
With the right support, the right strategies, you can get your life back from this phobia. You can live with so much less fear, even if you don't become best friends with spiders,
Yeah.
You can live a much more peaceful existence.
I love that. I couldn't have said it better myself. So if you're listening to this, and this is something you've struggled with, just know that there is hope, and there are steps that you can take starting today to kind of move in the direction of feeling better.
Yeah.
And having more peace of mind. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the really fascinating and often misunderstood world of arachnophobia.